Okay, so for this session, just before the break, we are going to cover a little bit of history about open source firmware and the open system firmware workgroup inside OCP. I'm well aware about it because I was part of the team who created that workgroup with Ron Minnick at the early beginning. So the whole story came from the Linux boot ID that we had a couple of years ago. So when open system firmware has been created, it was really focused on enabling a firmware workgroup at the BIOS and host level. And we focused on that during the past few years. And we were believing that it was really key to expand it to something slightly different. The main reason behind it is that we have firmware everywhere right now. And the biggest struggle and issue that we are all facing is how to maintain coherency with all of this firmware which are standing within microcontrollers, for the VRMs, for the fan management, for the BMC, for the host, I mean the SoC and all these kind of things. And that this is how we took the decision to expand the workgroup and change the name from Open System Firmware to Open Platform Firmware. So in 2018, sorry about that. So the project became quickly an incubation project because there was no firmware activity inside OCP. We created the full project in 2020, and the initial OCP accepted server badging requirement has been accepted in 2021. And another time it was only focusing on the host side, without too many constraints on the BMC and the PCI Express endpoints and any other hardware devices which might be containing firmware. So with the expansion of the SoC support and the creation of the DCMHS workgroup, we really thought that interoperability at the software level was something critical. And this is how we took the decision with Dong, myself, and the OCP Foundation that it was probably the right time to try to expand the open platform firmware, the open system firmware to the open platform firmware. So the goal of the open platform firmware workgroup will be to stay focused on the CPU side. So we are not dropping any work on the CPU side, and there will be definitely some workgroup focused on the SoC side, trying to have some commonality between chip vendors. I think it's also something important if we can reach that goal, just to avoid to reinvent the wheel, whatever the CPU is used at the host side. Working pretty hard on the control plane, I mean the BMC. So leveraging the hard work which is currently performed inside OpenBMC, but expanding it to the benefit at managing more the firmware which are available within the various components. Working with the PCI Express and CXL workgroup too, standardization consortium, just to be sure that we can integrate that properly. And as I say, there is also firmware in VRMs. I wouldn't say unfortunately, but software is critical, especially probably to fix issues without to have any kind of hardware recall. And that is something that we would like to enhance. There is also a massive need to create some standardization around the protocol that we need to synchronize all of this firmware. And that is an effort that we would like to emphasize within the next couple of months or a couple of years. It is not going to be done in a day. And we would like also to have a seamless update process and smooth update process. So before heading to the call to actions, let me hand over the mic to Bijan from the OCP Foundation, who will be sharing also his point of view about how important it is to expand the firmware workgroup of the OCP Foundation.
Thank you. First of all, we're very lucky to have guys like Jean-Marie and Dong involved with this project. These guys are great. They're subject matter experts, and where we want to take this is kind of why I'm standing here. I'm very excited about relaunching this as OPF. One of the things that I hear a lot is that, there's inconsistent handling within operations or design of firmware security, all the things that need to be managed. And it's inconsistent in that, if you go down the path of SCM or if you go down the path of BIOS, they're all completely different. They use different protocols. They work a different way. So I'm here as a cheerleader to say, hey, this is an opportunity to kind of standardize behaviors across all the firmware within the systems, right? With all the systems. I don't mean just boards, like BMCs. I also mean everything, like NICs and everything. So there's an opportunity here to kind of unify behavior and solve the problem so that everyone has a kind of a consistent, a very safe experience. Security is put on the front burner. A very open experience where everyone in the ecosystem can participate, where it's not closed or locked or whatever. And then finally, it allows us to find commonalities where maybe some ideas that we could leverage in different places can be brought in and applied everywhere. So like I said, I'm just here to cheerlead these guys. I think they're amazing. I love this kind of rethinking of OPF. I think the industry really needs it. A lot of people ask, various times, they bug me, hey, why doesn't this work this way? Or why can't I guarantee a rollback on my firmware or, whatever it is. So I'm looking to this group and all of you guys to participate in this effort to help us drive that vision, and that vision of kind of uniform, safe behavior with firmware and systems. So with that, I'll yield back.
Thank you. I think as the next co-leader of the work group, there is something important on which I'd like to emphasize for the next couple of months. That is to create specification, but also proof of concept. I mean, firmware is software. So it's pretty easy to collaborate around software today. So we can use GitHub, we can use a lot of tools just to create value around software. And during the past few months or years, we focused on the specification and what was needed to be compliant to be an OCP systems. And I think during the next couple of months, we might be also focusing more on the software side about how to fix the interoperability issue. So when we will be designing a specification, let's be sure that somebody try to implement it and validate it and can prove during an OCP summit that this specification works and that we can deliver some kind of reference code. So I'll be updating probably the open platform firmware GitHub pretty soon after the summit with some code. It will not be perfect for sure. I'll be needing help, and I hope that the community will be there just to help us to implement, I would say, the specification and just being sure that we are heading into the right direction. So with that said, I think we can have an early break. And the next speaking session will be at 2:45, if I'm not wrong.
So come back here at 2:45.
Oh, let me take some questions. It looks like we got questions. So sorry about that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Bijan, I mean, your thought process is great, right? I'm not sure. The problem statement is still not clear. What is the problem we are solving with this forum? In fact, I see there's a lot more divergence right now, which we are not even probably addressing it.
Okay, there is I think two problems that we need to address at the firmware level. So I would say getting a smoothness approach to deliver the firmware on the platform and being able to update it. But when I mean firmware, I mean all the firmware which are running inside an OCP platform.
So unified way of upgrading, downgrading firmware.
Yes, for example.
So
how do you ensure the security if we do not have a proper way to deliver a firmware update to any component within an OCP platform? This is just an example.
Yep.
So there are some protocols like MCTP, PLDMs, and all these kind of things. They are all in some way some kind of theory. They are not fully implemented into OpenBMC. They are not fully implemented at the system BIOS or ROM level, or even at the PCI Express endpoint. So we need to be sure that we can provide a rock-solid solution for this. So I think it's really critical, at least for the success of DCMHRs,
Sure.
and for the benefit of the OCP end users.
Right.
So that's the first thing. The second thing is there is still a lot of interoperability issue. So some people have some interpretation of MCTP, which might be different than others. So we need to find a way just to be sure that at least when we have OCP components, it could be an OCP NIC v3, it could be DCSCM modules or a CPLD or an LTPI end-to-end connectivity, that these things works and that we can provide way to test them and we can provide way to implement them with a reference code which might be relevant. This is just goal, but this is at least two main issues that we have identified today, which brought us to a state where we believe that it was really important to look at the firmware issue from a platform perspective instead of a component perspective. Because when we work at the component level, we have seen that it was pretty tough just to have all the teams working at the component level to work together to ensure that when we glue all down, there's no compatibility issues or there is no technical issues when we bring up the platform. Does it make sense?
Yeah, kind of just to add on to what he said, there's a lot of different use cases, and so I don't think that I don't think it's been settled like which ones are the first ones, what the priority list is. But there's a lot of use cases. He mentioned some of my hot buttons like interoperability and so on. But secure upgrade is like a key thing, right? It's a big attack service. But I mean, there's also as OCP's scope of projects expands, there's different platforms too. Like there's embedded platforms. It's going beyond just the traditional server architecture look. Now it's going into embedded devices and all kinds of things. So if there was a uniform way where all of these things could have assured upgrades and downgrades and version management and telemetry back to management systems and those kinds of things, I think we would all benefit from it.
Yeah. Thank you.
Do we have
Any other questions?
Let's go for a break and see you in 20 minutes, roughly.
Yeah,
Thank
the
you.
panel discussion probably will kind of dive deeper into this question as well, right? So come back at 2:45.